Excuse me, I think we're going to get started now. It's 5 after 12, and we have a lot of people online since this is a hybrid event, something we all have to get used to. So I will start now. Hi, Soma. Good afternoon. My name is Catherine Sinegal, and I'm the president of the International Women's Associates, or IWA. International Women's Associates is a Chicago-based nonprofit organization of more than 300 women of all different ages from 50 different countries. We welcome both foreign-born women and those who have lived abroad or who have international connections. Since our founding in 1978 by Doe Thornburg, we continue to celebrate our diversity through friendship, community service, and cross-cultural exchange. Doe's vision was to create an organization that promotes global understanding by seeing the sacred in everyone. It is this vision that attracts new members to IWA and keeps our organization vibrant. My own international experience includes 18 years of living overseas and raising my family in France, Japan, and Singapore before moving to Chicago in 2013. I want to give a big thank you to Denise Jorgens and the International House at the University of Chicago for organizing today's joint hybrid program featuring Shoma Roy of the Nourishment Projects. I hope this will be one of many joint programs we can collaborate on together. Thank you, and please enjoy.
Thank you, Catherine, and good afternoon and welcome to everyone both here at International House and joining us online. Welcome to International House here at the University of Chicago and to today's special program in collaboration with the International Women Associates. My name is Denise Jorgens, and I am the director here at International House. The mission of International House of Chicago and international houses worldwide, which is currently a network of 20 houses on 4 continents, is to enable students and scholars from around the world to live and learn together in a diverse community that builds lifelong qualities of leadership, respect, and friendship. This mission is achieved by daily interaction among students and scholars through internationally focused public programs such as today's event, through our unique facilities and community life activities designed to foster diversity of thought and experience. Today's program is one of over 100 held at International House of Chicago as part of our Global Voices Performing Arts and Lecture Series. Whether it's a music or dance performance, a film festival, cultural or national celebration, lecture, conference, or symposium, International House presents programs that advance cross-cultural understanding and promote civic discourse on community, national, and world affairs. As a part of our Global Voices Performing Arts and Lecture program, we are so pleased to collaborate together with the International Women Associates. IWA is very special to me. Doe Thornburg, the founder of IWA, was a member of the International House Board of Governors for many, many years. And I knew Doe before IWA was created. I was saying to some of the members earlier that while I wasn't a member of IWA in the early years, a number of years before Doe passed away, we started having lunch together regularly, and she insisted that I become a member of IWA and that I contribute, and I'm so glad that I have done that, and I look forward to future collaborations between iHouse and IWA. We invite you all to join us here at International House throughout the coming year for many of our other Global Voices Performing Arts and Lecture programs many of which are live streamed or recorded for later viewing. Information about our programs is available on our literature table in the entryway. For those of you that are here in person, you may sign up to receive our weekly e-bulletin, and of course, you can find all sorts of information on our website. On behalf of the Global International House community and IWA, I want to welcome you again and thank you for joining us today. And now I'm pleased to introduce our speaker, Soma Roy, founder of the Nourishment Project. After a 20-year career as an engineer working at Fortune 100 companies such as Siemens, Chevron, Novartis, and Raytheon, Soma left the corporate world to concentrate on her passion, the Nourishment Projects. Soma describes the Nourishment Projects as an online learning platform which broadens perspectives to discern what is worthy of our priceless, fleeting lifetime. Soma will speak for about 45 minutes, and then you will all have an opportunity to ask questions, either by using the Q&A function on your Zoom, or by coming up to the microphone, which will be here in the Assembly Hall of International House. So we'll have time for Q&A after the formal remarks. Thank you again for coming. Soma, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see the screen? Is it clear? I'm going to assume yes, so I will start. A very warm welcome to everyone. Thank you for sharing your afternoon with us for today's story. And thank you again to the International House and IWA for the very kind introduction and for hosting today's presentation, which is titled Sands, Creation Through Erosion. The Nourishment Project is about joyous curiosity and being part of something much larger than ourselves. Here are some of the references that inform this presentation. To see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wildflower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. That was by William Blake. And this photograph of the glittering Milky Way is the visual sense of eternity. This sand yearglass, flipped annually on December 31st, marks the passage of a year. James Joyce, in his The Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man, visualized eternity as a massive mountain of sand with a little bird carrying away in its beak one grain of sand at a time. And I thought, oh God, how tedious. An easier way to represent eternity of the universe is to the Hindu Trinity. When something manifests from eternity, a creation, the Hindu god of creation, Brahma, that which manifests exists for a time and is preserved, god of preservation, Vishnu. Eventually, destruction for a new beginning. So god of destruction, or more precisely, transformation, Shiva. And that is the framework for this presentation: story of creation, creation, story of destruction. We will start with the story of creation. Panes of glass atop a rock circle. We're in Helsinki, Finland. Let's take a walk and enter into the unexpected. This is the rock church. Made evident through the glass panels is light, a symbol of God's revelation. So be it Or Ein Sof of Judaism or Jesus through his teachings, I am the light of the world. He who follows me will not walk in darkness. That religious belief singularly presented by the Japanese architect Tadao Ando at Ibaraki. And it is luminous, radiant, the light divine, captured through concrete and glass, both made of sand. Sunlight pouring in through glass panes in churches, illuminating the word of God. Jeweled Bibles like these are designed to inspire awe. The priest would carry it during Sunday service, holding it aloft. The light streaming through the stained glass windows would irradiate it. The book was designed to dazzle and illuminate the devotees. Without transparent glass panes made of sand, light would not stream in on Sunday to illuminate this theater of splendor, to create this sumptuous atmosphere. Even with the velvet gold-threaded chasubles and vestments, without the power of natural sunlight dazzling through glass panels and glass panes, this holy vision isn't as transcendental. Man-made electrical light, ironically, accentuates only the artifice. So the development of medieval stained glass runs parallel with the development of Gothic architecture. Masons mastered the art of supporting the vault with pillars. Roofs did not depend on thick walls with small windows, and as the flying buttress system evolved, so did the possibility of larger and larger window openings with more and more decorated traceries. Is something wrong with the screen? I see the pictures aren't coming. In churches, glass windows were a sign of wealth, power, and divine presence. The church taught that light was the symbol of the divine spirit, and transmitted through colored images on the screen of the glass windows, once again made from sand, it brought the message from heaven. So be it the crown of thorns design, or Harry Clarke's stained glass masterpieces, Mary visiting Elizabeth, to be in the pathway of this level of beauty fills one with silence. Sand makes such moments of transcendence possible. Glass is produced from a mixture of lime and soda and silica, sand. Because in the medieval times, glass was an expensive and precious material which could not be made in large sheets or on the manufacturing scale we take for granted today. So in general, glass is made from sand, limestone, and soda ash, which is sodium bicarbonate. The ingredients are heated to a high temperature in a furnace until they melt together. The molten glass from the furnace cools to form sheets, and it was all hand done and thereby extremely time and labor intensive. So in the sun-drenched beauty of Ravenna, Italy, there is the Basilica of San Vitale, an extraordinary example of Byzantine art and architecture. The staidness of the outside is a perfect foil for what lies within. Do remember, this is 6th century CE, current era work. This workmanship, which includes glass, is showing that it is extremely expensive. We must now consider why the medieval church settled on this costly way of expounding the stories of the Christian faith. Light passing through colored glass has a thrilling effect unmatched by any other medium. For medieval people, stained glass was compelling because in those medieval times, most people lived in primitive conditions and their only experience of such color and splendor would be in religious buildings. They stepped into the house of prayers and their eyes were immediately caught by the visions told through the brilliant windows. The mystery created by vibrant colors and sacred images of divine figures was intended to overwhelm, just like those jeweled Bibles. Many of the original window panes now have been replaced, and the originals were most likely like these golden squares because the technology to make transparent windows wasn't that sophisticated yet, but it did have the Byzantine color of opulence, gold. So the interior of San Vitale would have glowed in the sunlight that streamed in through the windows of the church. On the left is the mosaic of Emperor Justinian with bread, and on the right is the complementary mosaic of his wife Theodora with the chalice. As a composite, the two mosaics represent the Eucharist. And these are glass mosaics. They're called tesserae. So these are actually pieces of gold leaf sandwiched between clear pieces of clear glass. When they are pressed into place by medieval workmen, the gold tiles were angled to best reflect the sunlight or the glow of a candle or perhaps a lantern. One by one, each tile is placed into the scene. One by one, each tile forms a bit more of the image. The process takes years. And though the picture would be much faster with brushwork, expensive glass is the medium. Each tiny piece of glass, and some were half the size of one's fingernail, symbolizes perseverance and an acute attention to detail and artistry, and therefore, by extension, to Jesus Christ. One marvels at their tenacity to produce these works without power tools and machinery, electricity, and other conveniences we take now. Glass and glass mosaics are one creative use of sand for other worldly aspirations. On a more terrestrial aspirations, literally off this world, are the massive land reclamation projects, of which Dubai's Palm Jumeirah is an example. Located just off the coast of Dubai, this major urban development adds a significant amount of upscale beachfront property to the area. Each of the islands is shaped like a palm leaf, with the trunk connected to the mainland. Man used to sail the seven seas seeking new lands to settle. Yet nowadays, they stay close to the shore and simply construct new coastline. None of this possible without sand. Almost 100 cubic meters of sand and 7 million tons of crushed rock was used to create a 550-hectare island. Sand was sucked up, dredged from the seabed with giant hoses, and then stored in dredging ships. The sand was cleaned and drained of water with unique compactors that stimulated millions of years of aging. Then the island and its protective seawall was created with sand, rock, and gravel. The $12 billion project began in 2001, and 6 years later, the island's first residents moved in. Today, the 17 fronds are home to about 1,500 beachfront mansions, with a further 6,000 apartments on the trunk. These islands are part of the Crown Prince Sheikh Al Maktoum's vision to turn Dubai into the #1 luxury and holiday resort. It's designed as catnip for humans. Spectacular fireworks, shopping malls, and it's entirely sensory overload. None of this is possible without sand. The concrete for the buildings, concrete is a mixture of cement and sand. The glass for the windows, made again of sand. The land nearby, reclaimed sand. The tall building one sees, the Burj Khalifa, needed to import sand from Australia for the concrete needed for construction of the hotel. Wasn't the sand nearby. Though Dubai is surrounded by sand, that sand cannot be used for construction. Salty sea sand is not a good aggregate with cement. Dubai's interest is not in these minutiae. Its objective is entirely sensory overload. And in a mesmerizing story, this tall building, the Burj Khalifa, transformed through animation, light, sounds, and a synchronized fountain show, and took the viewers on a journey at the onset of the second decade, 2020. Burj Khalifa wowed over 2 billion people across the globe with a breathtaking pyrotechnic show on the world's tallest building to ring in the new year. LED screens run down the east side of this 828-meter tall tower. It holds the Guinness World Record for the largest and tallest LED illuminated facade. On the left is UAE honoring New Zealand Prime Minister Ardern for her empathy with the Muslim community in the Christchurch attack. The center is UAE's solidarity with Italy during her most challenging COVID times. And on the right is the 150th anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi's birth. The facade of this iconic building is used to celebrate the strong bond between nations. And like the bat signal in Batman comics, it also signals release dates of anticipated movie epics. The Marvel comic universe shown here, Captain Marvel, Thor, Iron Man, and the rest of the universe of comics. And perhaps on Friday, this upcoming Friday, they will celebrate both the outgoing and incoming presidents of the University of Chicago. Our very best wishes for continued success of your esteemed institution. So why is all this part of a sand description, one might ponder? Well, the LED facade of the digital screen is a product of Silicon Valley. Revealed in the name silicon is silicon dioxide, SiO2, known also as silica. It is most commonly found in nature as quartz and is a major constituent of sand. Silica is also found in water, in plants and animals. And the first ingredient in the manufacturing process of computer chips happens to be, you guessed it, sand. Manufacturers first take silica sand and heat it up to about 3000 degrees Fahrenheit. And the silica sand melts down to form pure monocrystal, extremely thin wafers. I'm pointing to the wafer on the right here, that are eventually cut into and used to create thousands of small transistors. Transistors are the foundation of electronic computing. Effectively, they're very tiny on-off switches. The result is a wafer filled with transistors. The working set of transistors is integrated circuit, also known as chip. A chip is the backbone for most of the modern electronic devices like microprocessors, and these are essentials to a computer. So be it Microsoft or Apple, but since I'm using an Apple device, the narrative veers towards the brand Apple. Apple's state-of-the-art headquarters in Cupertino, California is Apple Park, which sits on a 175-acre property. And so from its concrete to the solar technology controlled through computers, you're using these silica-based microprocessors. It is all sand-based. This material, concrete, an aggregate of sand, gravel, cement, and water, forms the very basis of modern civilization. Concrete is a very old material, 8,000 years old. And by 2050, it's estimated that the Earth will hold 75% more infrastructure, things such as highways, ports, and power plants, than it does today. And much of it is going to be concrete. So Apple's headquarters is famed for its curvilinear glass. When first opened, there were persistent problems of people walking into the glass. I suppose they were too busy looking at their iPhone and didn't bother to raise their heads. As we learned earlier, glass is made from sand as well. So all of this is glass, Be it corporate structure, private residences, concrete and glass are common in infrastructure projects everywhere. This one, made of gleaming glass and marble-clad concrete, Montecito's Glass Pavilion, is an homage to Mies van der Rohe's renowned Farnsworth House, not far from University of Chicago. It's in Plano, Illinois. So a man's home is his castle, and though the original Farnsworth House should be known to have been designed for a woman. Another castle, this one obviously made of sand, because sand structures nowadays are bewildering. They're so different from the conical shapes I've made in my childhood, sticking twigs and debris in them. Many of the ones designed today are surreal. And one of the most famous one is done by a trained artist, Calvin Siebert, who is well known for his sand sculptures, and these he reputedly makes using $2 or $3 tools that he buys at the local hardware store. This sand construction represents the American dream of suburbia. And this picture is now going to serve as a transition point for this narration about sand. The story is now going to move from the story of creation into the story of preservation. Sandcastles again, these built by time. One of at least 14 castles spread along the north side of the Amu Darya River, known more commonly as the Oxus in Uzbekistan. The current remains of Kizil Castle belong to the version constructed in the 12th century, when the important Silk Road caravanserais and trading posts, which used to hug the Oxus to avoid the Kizil Desert, which is just north of this area, were at the height of the prosperities. The walls were buttressed around their base with a modern wall, as is shown here, to keep them upright. In the 13th centuries, the Mongols swept through the area. And by that time, the empire had reached its end. A century and a half later, the sand castles in this Khorazm area were in ruins, mainly because the Silk Roads were closed for business because the maritime trades were booming. So most of the trades were happening through sea routes. So these places were abandoned, literally deserted, and figuratively. What happens then is the sand comes and takes over, fills in the spaces within the walls, deserted indeed. So these castles weren't originally surrounded by deserts, although the desert was always close by. Water is essential for establishing a town. The land had long been nourished by the Oxus River. And when the Soviets initially expanded the system of water channels around the river for irrigation, it was a success. Then greed took over, and Soviet cotton production targets overstretched the river. So the Aral Sea, which is about 200 miles away, used to be fed by the Oxus, dried up. And so the ensuing depletion of the river welcomed the surrounding desert back in. And this desertification is an ongoing global issue. The abandonment of caravanserais due to lack of water is found in many spots along the ancient Silk Roads, which is shown in these green markings. Glacial water-fed towns were deserted once water dried up. Climate controls everything. History repeats even now. So along with the trade goods, ideology also passed along the Silk Road, and the Muslim armies had ushered in a new era of faith-driven power in the 8th century. We are now going to journey further east along the sandy roads into this area I'm pointing, the Taklamakan Desert. Humans had first started inhabiting this region nearly 5,000 years ago. They grew plants and vegetables, and the water from the high mountain glaciers surrounding the desert picked up carbon dioxide from decaying plant matter as it flowed through fields and riverbeds. Runoff from irrigated fields and riverbeds in this Taklamakan Desert had pumped nearly 20 billion tons of carbon into the underground aquifers there. Without an outlet to the sea, the runoff has no place to go but the deep desert aquifers that store the region's water. Because of their high pressure and salt content, these aquifers hold more than twice as much dissolved carbon content as the ocean by unit volume. But our interest is in another aspect of culture. So journeying into history to capture heritage, because this entire section is about preservation. Because of the aridity, sands are a perfect preservation material. So beyond these mountains, what lies beneath these sheets of sand are the fossils of art, religion, and knowledge. Our global history captured in trade. So in the early 20th century, there was a veritable treasure hunt in these regions, a plundering financed by European monarchs and governments. representing the most deservedly respected of the archaeologists. Here is Sir Mark Aurelstein, a Hungarian who became a British national in 1904. He was a consummate scholar, not a treasure hunter, with a disciplined military background, and he was fluent in Sanskrit. His meticulous documentation is found in the volumes of Ser India and many other books he has authored. It was the sand that had perfectly preserved for almost a millennia documents he discovered, buried undisturbed for centuries. The most famous of his findings is the Diamond Sutra, world's earliest dated, completed woodblock printed manuscript. In Sanskrit, it is known as the Vajra Serika Sutra, part of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, which is known as the Pranaparamita Sutra. So the wisdom achieved through introspection is the diamond that cuts through illusion to illuminate what is real. It helps with the discernment. Hence the Diamond Sutra, the jewel of wisdom. The Mahaparinirvana Sutra, which is a very rare blue and gold documents. It is blue for the term Utpala, which is the blue lotus that signifies victory over the senses. One needs to wonder, how did they get blue on the bark? Objects found beyond the material itself reveal history. Colors matter. And we only know this because it was perfectly preserved in dry sand. The Bauer manuscript, 51 of the original 55 or about 56 birch bark leaves resides in the Bodleian Library in Oxford University. This Sanskrit document from India was found in China, perfectly preserved because of the sand. Had it remained in India, the humidity of that country would have ruined it. A document even longer than the 16-foot long Diamond Sutra. Here is the 28-feet long Egyptian Book of the Dead in the Turin Museum. Sand preserved heritage in Egypt as well. A feat of architecture, the pyramids, made of limestones. And originally, the limestones would have been sanded, polished to a gleam, in fact, blindingly white, and set off against the tawny desert sand. It was done so to dazzle all who set eyes upon this marvel, because it was designed to represent the pharaoh's wealth and power. Current levels of smog and pollution have obscured the power of beauty, and artificial lights again cannot capture that radiance. Our focus on this section about sands is the aspect of preservation, which brings us to the area marked on the map. I'm going to point to it now by this red dot on the left-hand side. The dot represents two ancient harbors lying on the western shore of the Red Sea's Gulf of Suez. So the first is the Ain Sukna, and the second is Wadi al-Jarf, which is about 100 kilometers south of Ain Sukna. So these are two harbors. Wadi al-Jarf is probably the most ancient maritime harbor known in the world to date. So it's about 2600 BCE, BCE being before current era. So this is about 5,000 years ago. And this harbor is important because it served the Great Pyramid project by obtaining vast amounts of copper, which was necessary for the tools to build the pyramids. There are about 30 caves honeycombed into limestone hills, sealed up and hidden from view in a remote part of the Egyptian desert. And this is all a few miles inland from the Red Sea. These ancient rock carvings are akin to harbor instructions. So 17 of the 30 storage galleries that have been discovered have been fully cleared, and several dozen of large locally made storage jars, which probably served as water containers, were found. Included were the oldest inscribed papyri that have ever been discovered in Egypt. The Greek historian Herodotus had described the pharaoh Khufu as a harsh taskmaster who forced Egyptians to devote 20 years of their life to dragging stones to the Great Pyramid, because apparently Khufu was building the pyramids for his own aggrandizement and that he, abused his workers. However, these recently discovered papyri refutes that story and documents that these people weren't slaves, but viewed upon as specialists who were employed all year round by the royal administration. And from these records, preserved perfectly by sand, that the workers were rather privileged. And we know that by the food that was served to them. And so sand, due to its aridity, helps preserve this history. Do remember that there are very few textiles that survive, and Egypt was rich with textile, Egyptian linen, Egyptian cotton. These don't survive. Humidity does not help with preservation. A deposit of 99 stone boat anchors were found, and boats guide us to the maritime trade routes. So I'm going to point now, these yellow trade routes replaced mainly the green Silk Road land routes that had existed for many centuries before. And these Amarna letters, that are many of them, and many information like this can be found at the Oriental Institute, just steps away from where you're sitting. So the Amarna letters were diplomatic correspondences between the Egyptian administration and its representatives with neighboring kingdoms. One of the clay tablets documented a request by Pharaoh Akhenaten for glass to be brought to Egypt. Mesopotamia produced glass before the Egyptians did. And so, for example, a victory inscription from an Egyptian pharaoh who had returned from battle claimed he had brought back skilled glass workers from Mesopotamia. Glass, again made from sand, was considered very valuable and often colored blue to look like their treasured lapis lazuli. So this vessel, shaped like the local Egyptian balti fish, would have been a prized item, and many glass objects were royal gifts. It is interesting to consider the complexity of traveling with glass during those times and our times as well. Just as we do now when we travel, and once we're going to start again when times get better, glass would have to have been protected to withstand transportation on a camel's back, and they traveled for days to reach their destination. And perhaps it was shipped as a diplomatic or royal gift. In that case, the total weight of the goods had to be considered, whether gearing up for the camel caravan or putting it on the ships, because you couldn't pack all glass together because they would just smash into each other and they would get jostled during the camel's gate as well. It was difficult to make. It was even more difficult to carry and transport. Can you imagine the risk of breaking them in transit? With that context, the fact that these glass objects survived the passage of time, almost 3,500 years, is truly remarkable. Sands made these glassware and helped preserve them over centuries. So one of the recognizable anchors from those times is a good point to alert us to travel west to the other coast of Africa, to Namibia, the oldest desert in the world, where it meets up with the frigid Atlantic Ocean at Sandwich Harbor in Namibia, which is a very rare coastal desert. The cold waves of the Atlantic Ocean provide a vital source of life for the Namibian wildlife. The coastal desert can go years without ever seeing a drop of rain. Rain is a rare phenomenon here, and when it happens, the dunes are flanked by a green hue, indicating ephemeral grass growth, a truly special event in these parts of the desert. But normally, banks of fog begin to form on the shore, and overnight, they drift into the desert where they deposit water droplets on every grain of sand. Tokis, which is the common term there for these tenebrinoid beetles, are farmers of this fog. With so little moisture in the Namib, animals have mastered adaptations in order to thrive, to preserve their life in desert conditions. In the morning, after being bathed in the fog, they practically stand on their heads so that the fog droplets slide down and become a source of their daily water intake. I laugh thinking, look, they're doing yogic headstands. How spiritual. Kidding. It's interesting also to observe how sand creatures like this Namakwa chameleon have long legs to keep the body raised above the searing ground, helping keep their bodies cool. Additionally, many desert insects, like these dune ants, have a spectacular navigation ability. Unmappable sand dunes have no discernible paths, especially during sandstorms. Sands come in sheets and erase the landscape for hours. These ants don't get lost when foraging for food. They determine their walking direction homebound using celestial cues, the sky's polarization pattern and the sun positions. Direct sunlight and polarized lights are detected in different regions of the ants' compound eyes. They have two separate pathways for obtaining directional information. Nature just amazes. So that natural ability, thanks to evolution, is critical for survival. Massive trade winds, such as the Harmattan, transforms these swells. The storms are like the desert's primal inhale, and they leave the landscape in a constant state of becoming. It's as if the environment breathes through the undulations of sand dunes. And one can truly hoard superlatives here. Deadliest, driest, tallest, wildest. I would simply reclassify these sand dunes as the dune sea, a glittering dry ocean of sand, eternally unmapped. Without clear roads and a compass, can you imagine navigating in a sandstorm? And even if you had navigable roads, the asphalt, like concrete, is made of sand as well. And a movement of an entirely different hypnotic kind is that of a sidewinder. These snakes undulate simultaneously along two separate planes, moving both horizontally and vertically. At any point of their journey, only two parts of the snake's body are in contact with the sand to keep them cooler. So the rest of the body is thrust in the direction that the animal wants to go, or I suppose the reptile wants to go. And they clock about 18 miles per hour, which is faster than the average human running pace. And as far as preservation is concerned, the sand preserves, or more aptly camouflages them perfectly. What a beauty. But nothing prepares you for the reality that is the Welwitschia plant, which is endemic in the arid coastal regions of Namibia and Angola. It is a remarkably long-lived plant with specimens exceeding 1,000 and perhaps even 2,000 years in age. The majority of the trunk lies below the sandy ground with a taproot system that can extend up to 30 feet deep. So effectively, this living fossil produces only one pair of leaves, which grow continuously throughout its more than 1,000 to 2,000 year lifespan. And it is through these leaves, these two leaves, that minute pores absorb the majority of the tree's much needed water from fog in a region that barely receives 2 inches of rain in the entire year. And this plant is an anomaly of botanical design because typically desert plants are thorny, not long-leaved, because it minimizes exposure to evaporation in this unforgiving climate. And thorny beings like the camel thorn trees shown in the distance, I'm going to point on the top right, these are all camel thorn trees in the background. And this is in the Big Mama, one of the highest sand dunes of the Namib-Nokluft National Park in, obviously, Namibia. Almost 1,000 feet high, the scale of these dunes are a fearsome thing and makes the mind lurch vertiginously. And for context, I'm going to point again in the front, you see these two hikers following the ridge line up to the Big Mama. Blown into razor-sharp peaks by the wind, this dune was inscribed onto the World Heritage List in 2013. And simply by changing the camera angle, those long deceased camel thorn trees dotting the dead fly, which is the salt encrusted dry lake, it's blindingly white. These trees come into sharp contrast with the vibrant orange sands. This is not computer-aided coloring, this is nature. Sand colors globally are an artistry of chemistry. The black sands of Jökulsárlón in Iceland provide an arresting backdrop for the beauty of ice. In sunlight, it's made abundantly clear why diamonds aspire to be called ice. White sands, red, the sensual undulations of tawny sand, chemistry's palette absolutely bewitches. Man's creation with colored sand is evident in a Buddhist mandala, which are a testimony to devotion, patience, and beauty. They capture the essence of Buddhism, that there's an ultimate impermanence to all conditioned things, no matter how beautiful. Things will not last. Everything in this mandala will be removed ritually. In one fell sweep, they will take it away. And the sand will be poured into a river that will carry it far and wide. Impermanence, the perpetual erosion of existence, leads us to the final aspect of the story of sands, destruction. So where do we begin? Should it be Ludington, one of Michigan's most popular park? And this abuts the Sargent Sands Mining Company. About 2/3 of our nation's mined sand is used for fracking. When fracking was at its height a decade ago, the state of Michigan made more in one day from leases to energy companies who was exploring oil and natural gas productions than Michigan had made in the previous 80 years. Over 300 million years ago, all this region, our region, was a vast shallow sea with abundant sea life. This former riverbed, or I guess seabed, now has layers and layers of shale, thousands of feet below ground, and this holds natural gas. Breaking up the shale under high pressure and high volumes of fluid, which is known as fracking, is how the industry releases the gas from the shale. Almost every Great Lake state, so Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Illinois also, is impacted by this intensive form of gas drilling. High volume fracking uses millions of gallons of water, chemical, and sands to break up shale and refine it into oil and gas. That, however, is not our story today. It is not about biomineralization either. It is the silica in trees, such as teak, that make it such a prize for the timber industry. Teak harvesting is intimately connected to elephant exploitation in Southeast Asia. And in that context, such scenes are harbingers for deforestation. And though that is occurring in alarming rates, deforestation is not the focus in our story of sands. Rather, it is the sun-braided, silted river, the Mekong, that will be used to illustrate this aspect of sand. So the Mekong is represented because it really shows that rivers connect so many countries together. As was shown in the previous picture, the Mekong birthed many cultures: China, Thailand, Laos, Vietnam. And the focus now, as is obvious from this picture, is when the Mekong flows into Cambodia with her Angkor Wat temple structure. Water was essential to building this temple. So in 2016, September, the newspaper Phnom Penh Post reported on discrepancies on sand export figures. They found out that the arithmetic didn't add up to the United Nations figures. The Cambodian government issued denials and berated the United Nations data. Within 2 months, so by November 2016, due to intense local pressure, government denials changed into inquiry. They were seeking now transparency for the nation because they were curious about the discrepancy in national data with that of the United Nations. National statistics of sand export to Singapore were reported as 2.8 million tons of sand over 9 years. Market value, national income for 2.8 million tons of sand was $5.5 million for Cambodia. However, the United Nations figures, which aligned with Singapore data, showed 72 million tons of sand exported from Cambodia to Singapore at a market value of $752 million. So where did the $746 million, can you imagine that figure in Cambodian currency? And all this money legally belonged to the people for their welfare, in which quicksand of corruption did $746 million disappear. Independent journalism is vital for all nations. So in December of 2017, corruption was evidenced at every stage in Cambodia. Local police were part of the illegal and lucrative sand mining operation. And within weeks, on Christmas Day in 2017, there was a land collapse. Dredging sands made riverbanks susceptible. And that is this, as one sees in the photograph, is the obvious impact on real estate. Those whose homes were dismantled would not have any new land to live on because you can't afford land in landlocked places like this. They effectively become homeless and they become refugees. Political cunning, in sharp contrast to science, spun the story that a large amount of sand on the riverbed on the opposite side had pushed the water currents towards the affected area, causing a natural collapse. Politicians then further doubled down and said that the area had collapsed little by little due to the accumulation of sand in the riverbed. So the district governor declared that the ongoing sand dredging was helping make the new waterway, thereby stopping such further collapsing. You know, our world really needs an educated populace. By February 2018, corruption was evident in mangroved state-owned land being titled to Cambodian tycoons. The tycoons pleaded ignorance and in fact doubled down and said that they'd been duped by legitimate-looking deeds, that they, the tycoons, were the victims. That's their lament. In October 2018, the Ministry of Mines and Energy's Secretary of State, Dith Tina, further explained to the participants that the sand pumping activity was intended to unclog the water currents and divert the water so that it does not hit the riverbanks. So in Cambodia, dredging continues, and as stated by politicians, it helps the economy. Denies were issued for all illegality. That's the circus. Now here's the ground reality. Here are mangroves and riparian forests, which are critical to prevent erosion. These empty barges move along the mangroves, dredging sand. They dredge the seafloor for sand and fill these cavernous boats. They traverse the waterways continually, dumping the sands to create rebars and protecting walls for other sovereign nations. Sand dredging for land reclamation is used worldwide. So for our story, Singapore is representational, but it is representing a much bigger global problem. Through absolutely legal markets to expand its landmark, or I should say her landmark, Singapore has become one of the largest importers of sand in the world. But once again, I stress, Singapore tries to acquire all this legally. All of it, the concrete for the buildings, the asphalt for the roads, the glass for the windows, the exponential number of glass vials that we need now for COVID vaccines. They're all in glass vial, all of that, all depend on sand. And this is true globally. But all sand is not alike. Desert sand, for instance, is too smooth to make concrete. Fine beach sand, which has been pulverized to powder by the wind, though they are treasured on resorts so you can play on the sand, such sand cannot be used for construction. Uneven, angular sand is needed for concrete aggregate. And that is why Dubai had to import millions of dollars of sand from Australia for its hotel construction of the Burj Khalifa. So as you can guess, because of these enormous amounts of money, there is a massive sand mafia that exists in the world. And why does it matter? Well, because people are getting killed. When local people, usually poor people, try to protect the rivers, to protect the sand dredging, they get killed. Mining sand for riverbeds increases bank erosion. It degrades habitat and reduces the amount of sediment being carried downstream. And this sediment is what makes the deltas prone to high level rises. If the sediments aren't there, the sea keeps rising. Fish leave the areas where the sand is dredged, and thereby the families who depend on fishing starve to death. And downstreams, rivers turn because it reshapes the river, and flood farms and other farming areas receive much less silt. And so further, even more lives are ruined. To stand up to the local sand mafias is horrifying because not only are lives ruined, lives are effectively ended. In India, in Africa, in Southeast Asia, all through, this is what is happening. So environmentally, riparian regions, which is the interface between land and river, gets ruined. Dredging contributes to water level rising because trees are essential for maintaining water levels and water purity. We're discussing water in much greater depths in another ongoing series. But as the water level rises, it decimates lives. These peoples, thousands like her, will and are being made homeless. Their land, the sand, removed overnight, illegally procured, but then channeled through legal markets, help create land in areas that previously were only water. Her land removed, relocated unnaturally. So thereby the question needs to be asked, whose land is it? Because these are real estate in a most unreal fashion. And fashion it is. The Dutch have a long successful history of land reclamation. The Dutch politician, Joop Aartsma, this is just recent pre-COVID times, was pushing for a $15 billion plan to create a 50-kilometer long, 100,000 hectare island in the shape of a giant tulip. But one has to admit, San Francisco Airport, Treasure Island, Hong Kong, Mumbai, everywhere, these are all land reclamation. Sand dredging is an essential part of that story. All that concrete, all that money to be made, and because depending on the pound per square inch strength required for the job, concrete can cost in regions of about 75 pounds per ton. So that's about $99 per ton. Average prices in America are now at $50 to $75 per ton. Concrete needs sand. And with much of the high quality sand already extracted, there's a global shortage, which is sparking international disputes and fueling organized crime. That is why sand mines are guarded in places such as Colombia. There is huge money in sand. And because of the frenzied development of new dams, new roads, buildings, and factories, China has used more sand in the last 6 years than the US has used in the last century. And this construction is not stopping, neither in China, nor in India, nor in the US, nowhere. The stupefying economical and environmental impacts on riverbeds, on water, on livelihoods, simply due to our homes via sand. The land, the glass, the technology, the building, all of it. Because effectively, it's nature-made versus man-made creation. And it's important to keep in mind, our ambitions are meager. Nature takes always the longer view and has surplus. Given enough time, as painted in the poem Ozymandias, everything built by man will be deserted. In 2 weeks' time, in the 3rd issue of the water series that was just mentioned, it's titled Rain, R-E-I-G-N, not R-A-I-N. It's about the stories of the maritime routes that allowed for such empire building. And November also has a story on photography titled Eye of the Cyclops. And these stories and information about them can be found on our website. But most importantly, I hope the story of sand proved interesting. And as always, I am so grateful for this opportunity to present, and I wish you joy. I'm going to stop sharing now. Thank you again. Are there any questions I might answer? I'll look in the chat room.
Thank you very much, Soma. That was really interesting. You took us through the sands of time, I could say.
Yes.
Thank you. Now, I'd like to ask if anybody here has a question in person, and also I'm going to look at the questions we have on the screen. See if we have any questions. Does anybody here have anything? I think we were going to have a microphone. Yes? Yes.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm a grad school student here at U of Chicago, and I'm in the visual arts department, so I'm getting my MFA, and so it was really, really exciting to see the beautiful photos of the sand dunes, and really to connect that. I think it gets obviously very removed, you know, when it gets made into electronics, et cetera. So I thought that was like a very effective way. And I'm a performance artist, so I just thought the way that you kind of really merged the art of sand with the sort of realities that are, I guess, plaguing our relationship to sand as in society. And I was just wondering if you have any insights about that way of, I guess, convincing people, because it seems like a lot of also the events you were bringing up, I thought there was a really like kind of striking visual element to even just, you know, the way that you were describing, just the photos were all very engaging. So yeah, I'm curious because you can convince people using, I guess, facts and, you know, news articles and sort of that piercing quality of sort of reminding people of the beauty of these materials, and also the sand itself having such a, you know, if anyone has that experience with sand, that it's very kind of visceral and also just very lush as a material. So maybe I don't know if this is the right place to ask it, but I'm curious of your work with other materials or with sand, and if you've received any feedback, or have you kind of thought about how does art play into kind of furthering the, I guess, social mission? I don't know if that's was that clear, or maybe I can.
Very clear. And first of all, I'm so humbled and grateful that you liked the presentation. And your background as an artist is tremendously important. My background is in science, but I firmly believe data does not move people. Beauty moves people. An essential component of the Nourishment Project presentation. There's a tremendous power in the fragility of beauty. Once you move someone, there's a lasting power. Visual representation, as you very correctly pointed out, it's what moves you. If all that we needed was science data, science and lots of data, which we've had them for years, yet we ignore all that, be it in the form of biodiversity loss or climate change and things like that. But when you viscerally see what exactly does those data show up in the beauty, what you're actually losing, that's what moves people to action. So the fact that you saw this today and it seems to have moved you, perhaps it'll make an impact in that which you create in your degree as you move forward. These solutions don't happen overnight. Perhaps the solution will come years from now, and perhaps you will be one of the people who brings about a solution. So for example, as a concrete example, let's take the Cupertino Apple Park in Cupertino, California. When they were building that $5 billion infrastructure, they are LEED certified. Did anybody actually bother to ask because you can have proprietary specs, did they put down in their document, is the sand acquired legally, or where is it acquired from? Just that question alerts people, I need to know where is this sand coming from. That has major ripple effects. Paying attention to something, bringing light to the matter is first step. And then when you see how beautiful it is, one somehow or the other, I don't know too many people who will willingly hurt that level of beauty because that beauty is within. Does that help? Did I address what you asked me?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's, I guess, a perennial question in my own art making, sort of abstraction versus really kind of showing an issue that I'm curious to have people think of. So I just thought it was a very effective way as you were kind of driving this presentation so yes, so that was.
No, that's wonderful. May I ask you if you're ever interested, and please connect through International House if you like. The Nourishment Project is peer-to-peer learning. We teach classes in many places, including University of Chicago Charter School, all grades. If you ever wish to share and teach children what you think, and these are high school, middle school, elementary school, let me know, because I think your passion for your subject and an obvious passion to go beyond the obvious would be a great inspiration for children. Is that seem reasonable?
Great. Yeah, I'll definitely connect. Thank you so much for
Yes, thank
hearing
you.
me rambling. Thank you.
You were not rambling. I appreciate the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any other questions in the room? Yes, please.
Thank you for this awareness. Where is politics in this topic? Have you made this awareness to the world leadership?
If I get the question right, you asked me where is politics in this topic? Is that correct?
Right.
Well, the politics comes up in money and also in legislation to be able to transport all this sand. So for example, all the infrastructure that is currently under, I don't know, review in Congress, whatever that we are trying to build, and that's just in the United States. So know this to be true throughout the world. Whatever they wish to build, a lot of it will use concrete. Where are they getting the sands from? Are there steps put in place? If you're talking about sustainable design, are there legislation written in to really monitor, is the sand being brought out to create the concrete coming from areas, and these are normally third world areas that the sand is being illegally dredged from. If I can gather this data of facts, I know for a fact governments know this in much larger detail. What they do with it is what's telling. I often find, regrettably, low-level cunning passes as intelligence. So if you want to call buildings LEED certified and get a lot of I don't know, highest accreditation, unless you look really fine details, how exactly did you get this LEED certification? What are the materials used? If you don't ask the right question, perhaps you can say that you're very sustainable, when in reality you're not. I think the main thing of politics, the buffer to all that level of thinking, is an educated populace. The more people know, like the young woman who, the graduate student who came, now that she knows this affects, when she designs, if there's an architecture student here, perhaps when they design specs, they can write into their proprietary specs, show where the sand, where the concrete is coming from, where is the provenance of the concrete. Does that make sense?
Yes, I'm an architect and I never
Oh,
thought of using a spec on sand. So thank you.
yes, absolutely. Do you have any suggestions for us? What would you say?
No, I think that this is such an important topic. I just learned of it today, and thank you. But it seems to me that this awareness needs to be made a lot stronger and throughout the world.
It is a very important issue, I think. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions in the room? And I think we touched on this already a couple of times, but about how architects can be involved in creating the solutions to this problem. We've pretty much covered that at this point in time. But I'm sure that there's a lot more solutions that need to be thought of, hopefully through the younger minds who are going into architecture. Do we have any questions on the screen? I don't see any right here. I guess, do you have any other comments, Soma?
What can we do to prevent this disaster? I guess it's in education, and it's so heartening when we share these stories. And as I did not know the lady was an architect, so that was just a happy, like, that's a wonderful coincidence. People like that, once one knows better, one does better. So there's always hope. I believe in the arc of history is towards better things, because in the worst way possible, after the initial Black Plague claimed the Renaissance. So even though our worlds are going through some tumultuous times, I am very hopeful for the future. And these moments, this to be able to present the story through IWA and International House itself is a wonderful example of that. Thank you again for this opportunity. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank everybody who's joined us online for this presentation, as well as here in person. And I hope you enjoyed the lunch as well. And we do thank the International House for their wonderful hospitality. Thank you very much. Please have a good afternoon.